Today I come to share with you a powerful story from the Holy Scriptures. It is the story of Samson, a man chosen by God whose life teaches us profound lessons about strength, weakness, and redemption. Imagine with me, a man blessed with superhuman strength called to deliver his people. Samson, a judge of Israel, faced enormous battles against the Philistines. His strength was legendary, but his greatest struggle was with himself. Let us follow the journey of this servant of God from the height of his power to the darkest moments of his life. We will see how the Lord works in mysterious ways, using even our failures to fulfill his purposes. This is not just a story of physical strength, but of spiritual strength, of how God can use any of us, no matter how far we have fallen. Prepare your hearts, for the story of Samson challenges us to reflect on our own walk with God. How do we handle the blessings he gives us? How do we react when we fail? Let us dive into this fascinating biblical narrative and see how, even in the darkest moments, the light of God's grace can shine. The story of Samson reminds us that with faith, what seems like the end can be a new beginning in the hands of the Lord. If these messages have blessed your life, please consider subscribing to our channel and activating the notification bell. This way, you will always be notified when we share a new biblical reflection. Your like is very important to us. It helps us reach more people with the Word of God. Share this video with your friends and family. You never know who might need to hear this message today. In the comments, we would love to hear your reflections on the story we are studying. How has it touched your heart? Do you have a testimony to share? Or perhaps you need prayers? Let us know, and our community will join in prayer for you. Your participation is precious to us. Together we can grow in faith and spread the message of God's love. May the Lord bless you all. Now let us continue our reflection on the wonderful truths of the Scriptures. The Israelites had sinned once again in the eyes of the Lord. Because of this, the Lord delivered us into the hands of the Philistines, who oppressed us for 40 years. The Philistines were an aggressive people who lived southwest of Israel, between the Mediterranean Sea and the Jordan River. They were known as the Sea Peoples due to their long and illustrious history in the maritime world. During my time, the Philistines moved inland from the coast of Canaan, where they built their civilization. These cities were each ruled by a tyrant. The Philistines were mortal enemies of mine and my people. They were known for their innovative use of iron, superior to the bronze used by the Israelites for weapons and tools. The progress of my people as a nation was constantly hindered by the Philistines, who possessed superior technology in their weapons and adopted a more aggressive military strategy. My people simply could not deal with the overwhelming military might of the Philistines. They worshipped 3 gods, Ashtoreth, Dagon, and Baal-zebub, each with sanctuaries in various cities. My birth is as mysterious as I am. In those days, my father Manoah, from the tribe of Dan, lived in the city of Zorah. His wife, my mother, was unable to conceive and had no children. One day the angel of the Lord appeared to my mother and said to her, "Although you have not been able to bear children, you will soon conceive and give birth to a son. Therefore be careful. You must not drink wine or any other alcoholic drink, nor eat any forbidden food. You will become pregnant and give birth to a son, and his hair must never be cut, for he will be dedicated to God as a Nazirite from birth. He will begin to rescue Israel from the Philistines." The angel of the Lord who appeared to my mother generally seemed to be a man, but his appearance was like that of an angel of God. I was to be a Nazirite. The Nazirite vow is a very sacred vow. Under this vow, people consider themselves specially dedicated to God, letting their hair grow without cutting it, not drinking wine, not eating grape products, and avoiding any contact with something dead. Nazirites do not eat anything impure. The Israelites had rules about clean and unclean foods. A clean animal was one that had completely divided hooves and chewed the cud. Clean animals included oxen, cattle, sheep, goats, deer, etc. Unclean animals were pigs, camels, rock rodents, and rabbits. However, my case is special. I was to have this vow from the womb. My mother also had to share in the vow during the time she carried me in her womb. Even in the social structures of my time, the announcement that the child would be a male was especially well received. A son would not only continue the family name, but also provide leadership in the home and community outside of Israel. A son was also crucial for a person's well-being here and now, as well as in the afterlife. So she ran and told my father that a man of God who looked like an angel had appeared to her and said she would conceive and give birth to a son. My father prayed to the Lord and asked for the angel to return to give more instructions about me. My father really wanted the manual of my life. Lord, please let the man of God come back again and give us more instructions about the son who is to be born. God heard my father's prayer, and the angel of God appeared again to my mother while she was sitting in the field. Then my father asked, "When your words come true, what kind of rules should govern the boy's life and work?" The angel of the Lord said to him, "Make sure your wife follows the instructions I gave her. She must not eat grapes or raisins, drink wine or any other alcoholic drink, or eat any forbidden food." I was to be set apart and reserved for God's will. The angel of the Lord honored my father's request for confirmation, but did not answer his request to know the future. He simply called my father to obey what God had already told them to do. The angel of the Lord proved to be wonderful, doing a wonderful thing, ascending in the flame of the sacrifice to heaven. And my father said to my mother, "Surely we will die, for we have seen God." But she said, "If the Lord had wanted to kill us, he would not have accepted a burnt offering and a grain offering from our hands, nor would he have shown us all these things, nor would he have told us such things at this time." My father may have known what God said to Moses, "You cannot see my face, for no man can see me and live." He feared that because they had just seen the Lord, they would soon die. But my mother understood that God had not done so much for them to abandon them now. God's past work in our lives is a promise of his future care and blessing for us. My mother was an invaluable source of encouragement for my father's faith. She did not criticize him. The prophecy was fulfilled and I was born. The promise of the angel of the Lord came true, proving to be true. My mother named me Samson. In ancient Israel, either parent could name a child, but there are more accounts of mothers naming their children than fathers. My name, Samson, derives from the Hebrew word for son, meaning little son. As I grew, the Lord blessed me. The Spirit of the Lord began to stir within me. From the moment of my birth, it was clear that I was destined for greatness. As a child, I possessed a unique strength surpassing that of any ordinary man. However, like all men, I was not immune to the temptations of the world. In a sense, I was truly a man of my time. One day, while I was in Timnah, a Philistine woman caught my eye. It was a case of love at first sight. I saw this woman and immediately wanted to marry her. When I returned home, I told my father and mother, "A young Philistine woman in Timnah has caught my eye. I want to marry her. Get her for me." Timnah was a Philistine city in the land of Canaan, east of our camp. My father and mother opposed this as I was heading into Philistine territory. They asked, "Isn't there a woman in our tribe or among all the Israelites that you can marry? Why must you go to the pagan Philistines to find a wife?" But I said to them, "Get her for me. She pleases me." And they relented. She was right in my eyes. Love at first sight is a powerful but dangerous thing. Although arranged marriages were not mandatory, this was the common practice at the time. Arranged marriages in my time often represented alliances meant to ensure the continuity of families through offspring. My parents advised against such a woman. In Israel, marriages were usually conducted within the clan or tribe, although there were no laws against marrying someone from another tribe. For an Israelite, marrying a Philistine posed a special problem, a commitment to peaceful coexistence and mutual acceptance between the clans. However, I disobeyed and desired that woman. My parents were simply concerned with what Moses had said. Moses declared, "We shall not marry them, nor give our daughters to their sons, nor take their daughters for our sons, for they will turn our sons away from following the Lord God to serve other gods, and the wrath of the Lord God will be kindled against us and destroy us quickly." But I still wanted her, and after a time my parents gave in. Now my family would have to travel to Timnah with me to get my wife. The day arrived and we set out. At one point during the journey I was alone near the vineyards of Timnah. It was a unique place since Nazirites were not supposed to have anything to do with grape products in any form. Suddenly a young lion attacked me. At that moment the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon me, and I tore the lion's jaws with my own hands. As I said, I was unique. During my time, Asian lions were common throughout the Fertile Crescent. In fact, the lion symbolizes chaos and the wild world in all its forms. The lion was more like a goat to me. I left that place and did not tell my father or mother about this event. We had to complete our mission. When I arrived in Timnah, I spoke with the woman and was very pleased with her. Everything seemed to be going well. Now I could return home and come back here for my own wedding. When the time for the wedding came, I had to leave home once again. During my journey, I passed by the same place where I had killed the lion some time ago to look at the lion's carcass, and I discovered that a swarm of bees had made some honey in the carcass. I scooped some honey with my hands and ate it on the way, a reward for a victor. I also gave some to my father and mother, and they ate, but I still did not tell them that I had taken the honey from the carcass of a lion. I did not tell them because it violated my Nazirite vow, which stated that a Nazirite should never touch a dead body. While my father was making the final arrangements for the wedding, I organized a feast in Timnah, as was customary for young men of the elite. It would be 7 days of pure celebration. Literally, it was a drinking feast, a 7-day festivity at the bride's parents' house, culminating in the consummation of the marriage. The seriousness of the matter for me is accentuated by the fact that my Nazirite status specifically prohibited me from consuming products derived from grapes. People were officially married when their families reached an agreement. The dowry and the bride price were exchanged, and the marriage was officially celebrated. Afterward, the marriage was consummated, and the two became husband and wife. When the bride's parents saw me, they selected 30 young men from the city as my companions. I was the man of the moment with my own audience. I said to them, "Let me tell you a riddle. If you solve my riddle during these 7 days of celebration, I will give you 30 fine linen tunics and 30 sets of festive clothes. But if you cannot solve it, then you must give me 30 fine linen tunics and 30 sets of festive clothes." They accepted. "All right, let's hear your riddle." So I told them, "Out of the eater came something to eat, out of the strong came something sweet." 3 days later, they were still trying to figure out the answer. On the 4th day, they said to my wife, "Seduce your husband so he will explain the riddle to us, or we will burn your father's house with you inside. Did you invite us to this party just to make us poor?" Then my wife came to me crying and said, "You don't love me. You hate me. You gave a riddle to my people, but you haven't told me the answer." I told her, "I haven't even given the answer to my father or mother. Why should I tell you?" Then she cried every time she was with me and continued this way for the rest of the celebration. Finally, on the 7th day, I told her the answer, for she was tormenting me with her crying. Then she explained the riddle to the young men. So before sunset on the 7th day, the men of the city came to me with the answer, "What is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion?" My Philistine wife's willingness to ally with her people against me was a great blow to me. Angrily, I replied, "If you hadn't plowed with my heifer, you wouldn't have solved my riddle." My wife had gotten what she wanted through manipulation, but lost my respect. I paid the debt, but I did so at the expense of the Philistines. I executed 30 of those enemies. I went to the city of Ashkelon, slaughtered men, took their belongings, and gave their clothes to the men who had solved my riddle. But I was still furious about what had happened, so I returned home to live with my father and mother. Later, during the wheat harvest, when everything had calmed down, I brought a young goat as a gift for my wife. I said, "I will go into my wife's room to sleep with her." But her father did not let me in. My wife had been given to my companion, who had been my best man at the wedding. What a best man! I won the battle but lost the war. My wife left me. "I really thought you hated her," exclaimed her father, "so I gave her in marriage to your best man, but look, her younger sister is even more beautiful than she is. Marry her instead." I was furious, enraged. Then I said, "This time I cannot be blamed for what I will do to the Philistines." My anger was truly unleashed against her people. I took my time and went out to capture 300 foxes. I proved to be the master of beasts, first effortlessly subduing a lion and then capturing and manipulating 300 foxes. I tied their tails in pairs and attached a torch to each pair of tails. Then I lit the torches and let the foxes run through the Philistines' grain fields. I burned all their grain, including the sheaves and unharvested grain. I also destroyed their vineyards and olive groves. When the Philistines found out who had done this, they asked, "Who did this?" "Samson," was the answer. They explained that it was due to my father-in-law's actions that I destroyed their fields. So the Philistines went and captured my wife and her father and executed them. When I found out what had happened, I made a vow. Because of this, I will not rest until I avenge myself on you. I was in a complete spiral of anger. First I was deceived, then my wife married another man, and now she had been executed. This is the bitter story of retaliation, trying to avenge the wrongs committed. I attacked the Philistines with great fury and took refuge in the rock of Etam. The Philistines, in retaliation, camped in Judah and spread out near the city of Lehi. When the men of Judah saw them, they asked the Philistines, "Why are you attacking us?" The Philistines said, "We have come to capture Samson. We have come to take revenge on what he did to us." Then 3,000 men of Judah went down to capture me in the cave. When they arrived, they said to me, "Don't you realize that the Philistines rule over us? What are you doing to us?" But I replied, "I only did to them what they did to me." Then the men of Judah said, "We have come to tie you up and hand you over to the Philistines." I accepted, but made them promise not to kill me. Although I am strong, I am not invincible. They replied, "We will only tie you up and hand you over to the Philistines. We will not kill you." The fact that the soldiers of the tribe of Judah handed me over to the Philistines shows how much my people were under Philistine oppression. They preferred to please their oppressors rather than support me. As Samson, I submitted to them. Then they tied me up with 2 new ropes and led me over the rock. When I arrived in Lehi, the Philistines came shouting triumphantly. But the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon me, and I broke the ropes on my arms as if they were burned flax, and they fell from my wrists. Then I found the jawbone of a freshly killed donkey, took it, and with it I killed 1,000 Philistines. I was a one-man army. Afterward I said, "With the jawbone of a donkey I piled them in heaps. With the jawbone of a donkey I destroyed 1,000 men." When I finished boasting, I threw the jawbone away, and the place was called Ramoth Lehi, Hill of the Jawbone. After this great feat, I became a judge. You see, I belong to a group of people in history called judges. But this does not accurately reflect the meaning of my work. In Hebrew, the word means problem solvers. So you could say that I belong to a select group of people whose mission was to save God's people from themselves and others. A judge is described in terms of his deeds. Now I am about to embark on one of the most dangerous missions ever attempted. I judged Israel for 20 years. During this time, the Philistines still dominated the land. After that, I traveled to Gaza, where I saw a prostitute and subsequently had relations with her. The Gazites heard someone say, "Samson is here." So they surrounded the place and waited all night at the city gate to ambush me. They remained silent all night, saying, "In the morning when it dawns, we will kill him." But I rested there until midnight. At that moment I got up, took hold of the city gates and the 2 posts, lifted them up, bar and all, and placed them on my shoulders before carrying them to the top of the hill that faces Hebron. These gates I carried were not ordinary. War chariots needed to pass through them, so they had to be wide enough. The gates themselves consisted of a pair of double wooden doors, made to prevent an enemy from easily entering. The doors were made of heavy boards secured by a sturdy horizontal beam that slid through grooves in the doorposts. The gates were reinforced by wooden posts whose exteriors rotated in stone sockets. The gates of Gaza that I tore from their sockets and placed on my shoulders weighed about 400 to 500 kilograms, approximately 200 kilograms each. After all this, you might think I had learned all my lessons, but I succumbed to temptation again. My choices, filled with pride, would lead me down a treacherous path. During one of my travels, I met Delilah, a woman whose beauty could ensnare even the firmest souls. Her cunning seduced me, and driven by my desires, I gave in. I fell in love again and succumbed to a woman completely wrong for me. I wanted to be used by God, but I also gave in to the seduction of sin. I kept the outward characteristics of my Nazirite vow with zeal, while at the same time sinning openly with a prostitute. I did what many do when deceived by sin. I compartmentalized my life and imagined that there were some areas that mattered to God and others that did not. Once again, I was in Philistine territories, and the rulers were thirsty for my downfall. The Philistine leaders saw an opportunity to capture me and extinguish the flame of rebellion that burned within me. So they went to Delilah and offered her 10,000 pieces of silver. Delilah was also deeply in love, but with money. 100 shekels were equivalent to over 63 kilograms of silver. She accepted the offer. Then she said to me, "Please tell me what makes you so strong and what it would take to securely tie you up." I replied, "If they tie me with 7 new bowstrings that have not yet dried, I will become as weak as any other person." So she tied me up with them. She had hidden some men in one of the rooms in her house and shouted, "Samson, the Philistines have come to capture you." But I snapped the bowstrings like a piece of string that burns in the fire. So the secret of my strength was not discovered. Then she said, "You are mocking me and telling me lies. Now please tell me how you can be securely tied." Delilah knew I was strong, but she also knew I could be tied up by something, and this was true. I replied, "If they tie me with new ropes that have never been used, I will become as weak as any other person." So she took new ropes and tied me up with them. The men were hidden in the inner room as before, and again she shouted, "Samson, the Philistines have come to capture you." But once again I snapped the ropes from my arms as if they were threads. Then Delilah said, "You are mocking me and telling me lies. Now tell me how you can be securely tied." I replied, "If you weave the 7 braids of my hair into the fabric on the loom and tighten it with the shuttle, I will become as weak as any other person." So while I was sleeping, she wove the 7 braids of my hair into the fabric. Then she tightened it with the shuttle and once again shouted, "Samson, the Philistines have come to capture you." But I woke up, pulled the shuttle and the loom free, and released my hair. She complained, "How can you say you love me when you don't share your secrets with me? You have mocked me 3 times and still haven't told me what makes you so strong." She tormented me with her crying day after day until I was tired of hearing her. Finally, I shared my secret with her. My hair has never been cut, for I have been dedicated to God as a Nazirite from birth. If my head were shaved, I would lose my strength and become as weak as any other person. She realized that I had finally told the truth. So she called the Philistine rulers, "Come back once more, for he has finally told me his secret." The Philistine rulers returned with the money in their hands. Delilah made me sleep with my head on her lap and then called a man to shave off the 7 braids of my hair. In this way she began to bring me down, and my strength left me. Then she shouted, "Samson, the Philistines have come to capture you." When I awoke, I thought, I will do as before and free myself. But I did not realize that the Lord had left me. I did not know that things were different. I had lived in compromise for so long that I thought it would never make a difference. At that moment, my strength disappeared, leaving me at the mercy of those who sought my ruin. Chained with shackles, a once powerful man was reduced to a mere mortal. I could only watch as my captors celebrated their triumph. The Philistines captured me and gouged out my eyes. I would never see the light of day again for the rest of my life. This was indeed a cruel punishment from the Philistines. It is ironic that I was blinded in my captivity because I was drawn to unhealthy relationships through my eyes. My inability to control this attraction to women led me to this. I insisted on the freedom to do what I wanted, and it left me with no freedom at all. Sin has its wages, and this was my payday. My sin left me blind in captivity and enslaved. Before my blindness, captivity and enslavement were only internal, but they eventually became externally evident. They took me to Gaza, where I was chained with bronze shackles and forced to grind grain in prison. Now I am here, trapped, blind, and humiliated, but I found solace in the remnants of my faith. In the depths of my darkest hour, I called out to the Lord God, seeking one last burst of strength to avenge myself on my enemies. God gave me hope in the midst of a dungeon. I placed my hand on my head and felt that my hair was beginning to grow back. Yes, my hair was growing back. This meant that I could regain my strength. I would not regain my sight, but I would regain my strength because my hair was growing back. My sin made me a miserable loser, but I knew I would have a chance to redeem myself. The Philistine rulers were holding a great festival, offering sacrifices and praising their god Dagon. They said, "Our God has given us victory over our enemy Samson." Dagon, also known as Dagon, was one of the oldest deities in Mesopotamia, often depicted as a half-man, half-fish creature. He was considered the father of all other gods and was widely worshipped in the region called the Cradle of Civilization, where agriculture is believed to have first begun. The statue of Dagon resembled a giant man. Some representations show him as a triton, a human with fish-like features below the waist. Some scholars have called him the fish god, which makes sense given his association with the Philistines and their location along the coast. The Philistines continued to worship Dagon during my time. Dagon's son, Baal, was worshipped in various ways throughout the land. Dagon was worshipped in temples that could be found throughout Mesopotamia. According to the Bible, the cities of Beth Dagon, Gaza, and Ashdod were home to some of the most important temples. He was worshipped through offerings and participation in festivals. When the people saw me, they praised their God, saying, "Our God has delivered our enemy into our hands, the one who killed so many of us. Now he is under our power." The followers of Dagon conveyed a direct message to everyone in the land. "Our God is stronger than the God of Israel, for we have conquered Samson." My disobedience led others to deny God. Half drunk, the people demanded, "Bring Samson out so that he may entertain us." So I was brought out of the prison to entertain them and was placed between the pillars that supported the roof. The Philistines continued to mock me in this grand display. They used a boy to keep an eye on me. I asked the young servant who was guiding me by the hand, "Place my hands against the pillars that support the temple. I want to lean on them." Now the temple was completely filled with people. All the Philistine rulers were there, and there were men and women on the roof watching me. I am praying to the Lord God, "Sovereign Lord, remember me once more, O God. Please strengthen me one last time with one blow. Let me pay the Philistines back for the loss of my 2 eyes." This is the end of the road for me, my opportunity for redemption. I wanted to be used by God, but I also gave in to the seduction of sin. I am placing my hands on the 2 central pillars that support the temple, pushing them with both hands. I pray, "Let me die with the Philistines." My story, though full of heroic acts and extraordinary feats, serves as a cautionary tale. It reminds us that strength, both physical and spiritual, must be used wisely and tempered with humility. It warns against the allure of temptation and the consequences of succumbing to desires. But most importantly, it speaks of redemption, for even in my downfall I found the strength to triumph and fulfill my destiny. And here ends my story.